everybody. All right, thanks everybody for joining us here this morning in these most unusual of times with COVID that calls for press conferences like this, but really appreciate the people that are showing up online, and thanks very much for those that are here in person that are socially distanced with appropriate protocols. It was 10 years ago this month that I attended my first LMPD graduation ceremony and swore in 27 new officers. That talented group of recruits included military veterans, National Guard members, and those following a family tradition of service. 27 men and women who were committing not only themselves, but their moms and dads, brothers and sisters, wives and children who joined in that day's celebration to a life and career of service and sacrifice. And during that ceremony, I said that, quote, "I believe providing the safety and security of our citizens is the most important responsibility that a mayor has. And I believe the citizens of Louisville have the right to live and work in a community that is safe." And those recruits, as has every Louisville officer before and after them, declared their own commitment to put themselves on the line to ensure our public safety. And as mayor, I can tell you I've seen constantly the sacrifices that our officers make, patrolling in the dark of night and the light of day, guarding our community and working to keep us safe. So I want to again express my gratitude for that commitment and sacrifice. And as I begin my final 2 years in office, I reiterate that working to make Louisville a safe and secure city for all remains my top priority. Obviously, when you look back on 2020, it was an exceptionally challenging time for our cities, our nation, our police officers, our citizens. All of us have struggled with COVID-19, its health and economic impacts, its impact on how we interacted with each other, and far too many suffered and perished because of this terrible disease. Many Louisvillians have felt the pain caused by a totally unacceptable increase in gun violence. In the wake of Breonna Taylor's tragic death, scores of people took to the streets to speak to that pain and advocate for racial justice. And your city government continues to act. Metro Council passed and I signed Breonna's Law, which bans the use of no-knock warrants, sets guidelines for the execution of all search warrants by LMPD, and requires active body cameras whenever a warrant is served. We launched an external top-to-bottom review of LMPD policies, procedures, and practices so we could identify strengths and areas to improve, and the report is expected to be released later this month. We implemented and proposed numerous other reforms to policies about search warrants, currency seizures, drug testing, early warning systems, personnel files, the use of tear gas, body cameras, use of force, and the duty to intervene. Working with Metro Council, we created a new independent civilian review and accountability board, an Office of Inspector General to give an additional layer of review to LMPD disciplinary matters. We also increased officer pay to make it more competitive with surrounding jurisdictions, while also advocating for new laws, policies, and state funding streams to promote mental wellness amongst our officers, including making it a crime to attempt to blind an officer with a laser light device and criminalizing the practice of doxing a public official. And we hold regular meetings with those calling for racial justice to listen, learn, and understand the reforms needed to make us the racially just city that we all want. But also, we know these improvements are not enough. Not enough for our residents, and not enough for the 1,000+ committed, caring police officers who also want change. Policing is at a crossroads in America and here in our city of Louisville. One path will keep us with the status quo, where we continue to too often repeat the mistakes of the past and frustration, where we see pain and anger boil over in our streets. The other path can take us from tragedy to transformation. That's the path we're going to choose. And when I hear from our city, I am really heartened that both our community and LMPD have the awareness, the will, and the ability to work together for that transformation. For LMPD, that means embracing the best practices in 21st century policing and understanding that community trust must be at the center of every policy and every police action. It means understanding that the legitimacy of police in the eyes of the public results directly from police interactions with the community and police resolve to improve those interactions while keeping us all safe. Our residents have a role. More than ever, we need your voices, your experience, your wisdom, because public safety is something we co-produce, and it requires mutual accountability. For its part, Metro government must provide the resources for training, professional development, competitive working conditions, and officer wellness programs so that LMPD is positioned to be the absolute best police department in the country. That's a goal we can achieve. And that achievement will create excitement, commitment, recruiting momentum, and community support, and most importantly, the safe city that the people of Louisville deserve and demand. Achieving our goals also requires that we have an experienced, progressive, reform-minded leader who believes in the role of policing, but also knows that the practice of policing must evolve with the times that we live in. Someone who will focus on the steps necessary to restore confidence of residents, especially those traditionally marginalized. Someone tough and undaunted by the challenges. Someone skilled but open to new ideas. Someone who has proven that she can listen and she can lead. A leader, as the public requested in our focus groups, who not only understands but embraces the co-production of public safety. Residents and police working together with accountability, transparency, honesty, and compassion. That's why today I'm very excited to announce that Erika Shields will, on January 19th, become the new chief of the Louisville Metro Police Department. Congratulations, Erika. Chief Shields has been a change agent throughout her long, distinguished career as an entry-level police officer in Atlanta. Her authentic and vibrant personality and strong listening skills helped her easily connect with the people that she served. She worked her way through the ranks over 25 years to become the chief of the Atlanta Police Department, a well-respected visionary, both locally and nationally, for her ability to build strong community and police relations and strategize, execute, and produce results, including a 3-year decline in felonies in Atlanta. And when tragedy happened in her city, she put her city before herself, stepping down so she would not be a distraction as her community worked to heal. And when she came before us as an applicant to be our chief, saying this was the only chief position she was interested in, and full of passion, and with the skills and experience to achieve the improvements and reform that we need, she was the unanimous choice. Let me say that again. She was the unanimous choice of our diverse selection committee. So it is with deep pleasure that I introduce you to our next chief of the Louisville Metro Police Department, Chief Erika Shields. Chief?
Thank you, Mayor. Congratulations. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'd like to thank you, Mayor Fisher, and I appreciate the trust that you and the interview panel and Chief Hess have afforded me. I am truly honored to be selected for this important position at this critical time. As someone who has dedicated years of their soul to policing, I understand that there is much healing to do across the country and here in Louisville. But what I also see is an incredible opportunity. Louisville and LMPD have the opportunity to get this right and to create a model for other cities to follow. And I believe that when LMPD identifies the path in which they can be responsive to their communities in a manner that is consistent with what the public should expect and shows the ability to hold their officers accountable, then we will have hit that success. I believe, too, that my time with the Atlanta Police Department, 25 years, 3.5 years of them as chief, positions me uniquely to understand the needs of some of the communities who feel most removed from LMPD. In Atlanta, I had the pleasure of serving in the home of the civil rights movement. It is Atlanta. It identifies Atlanta. It's a part of its culture. The police department is majority black. The city is majority black. I worked for only black mayors and black police chiefs. And what happened over time as a career cop there is that the environment fostered in me an understanding of the ties between institutional racism and policing. Because I was compelled to understand the history of the city. And once I understood the history of the city, I could see the nexus. And so policing and race to me is not mere training blocks of instruction or a work rule in a disciplinary manual. Instead, it's that history that tells us and shows us day in and day out that these challenges remain for individuals of color, and that for a police department to be successful, we must take that history into account in all portions of our operations. The last year has shown that we in law enforcement have a long way to go. And so, what does it mean for law enforcement and the communities that we serve, all of them? And I think the key thing is getting the department, every department, to a space where they understand, regardless of a person's skin color, gender, sexual orientation, or economic status, we have an obligation to police consistently, fairly, and equitably. And so to that end, I commit to begin my work here with a focus on rebuilding community trust that I believe was already eroding prior to Breonna Taylor's killing. And I also commit to tackling gun violence. The number of deaths in this city last year due to violence, the homicides, is unacceptable. There's no excuses. We at LMPD must do better. I look forward to conversations with LMPD about all of that and what we are going to do specific, operationally, once I begin the job. In closing, I would like to take this opportunity to leverage the coverage to speak to LMPD and say to them, yes, I do see that there is an enormous amount of work to be done. I know that you're tired, you're fatigued, and you feel as though no one appreciates what you're doing. And yes, policing has become increasingly difficult over the years. But I will tell you, I love being a cop. I take pride in being a cop, and I take pride in our profession. And my experience tells me is that most police feel that same way. You want to do the job as you were trained to do it, and you want to do it well. And I firmly believe that if we commit ourselves to the highest standards, we're open to hearing what the various reform recommendations are, if we're committed to being truly transparent, We're a change agency. We will hit and accomplish what the mayor has spoken to, and that is being the best police department in this country. Thank you.
Thank you. As everybody knows, it's been almost a six-month-long process to identify and recruit and sign a new police chief. So I would now like to ask our public safety chief, Amy Hess, to talk about the process that led to this selection, as well as introduce the members from the panel who unanimously recommended Chief Shields. And I just want to say before you come up here, Amy Hess, you've done an incredible job shepherding us through a very challenging time, always focused, always on task, with good humor, getting us to a very successful result. So really appreciate the wonderful job that you've done. So please welcome Amy Hess.
All right, good morning, and thank you, Mayor. So this is a big day, a day that has been actually, I think, 7 months in the making, a day that has culminated from a tremendous amount of work, deliberation, and input, all in an effort to find the right leader for our police department and for our city as we move forward. First, I want to say how fortunate we are to have partnered with the Police Executive Research Forum, PERF, on this project. The PERF team, led by Charlotte Lansinger, has been doing police executive searches for a long, long time. And they were instrumental not only in recruiting a highly qualified and diverse pool of candidates, but also in providing continual advice, guidance, and support based on their comprehensive understanding of policing issues and the current environment. Now, I know there are many questions about the process we used, and while I think we have publicly explained much of this before, I want to take this opportunity to recap and to address some lingering questions. So we signed the contract with PERF on June 4th, and from the outset, we heavily emphasized getting input from both the public and the LMPD. We started by heavily marketing 2 surveys, which were posted online from June 10th to July 17th and were accessible through call takers as well. First, the public survey, we had 10,102 responses. 92% of those respondents said they resided in Jefferson County. The top zip codes that responded, 40205, 40204, 40206, 40299, 40207, but every zip code in the county was represented. We asked questions like, what are the most important qualities or skills you want to see in the next police chief, and what are your suggestions for improving police services? And then we had the LMPD survey. 185 respondents. We asked questions like, what do you think the department does really well? What 3 things would you change about the department? What kind of leader do you want to see as your next police chief? The next thing we did was we held 21 listening sessions from June 29th through July 16th. We sent out 265 invitations. About 2/3 of those were sent to community members and about 1/3 to Metro government and to elected representatives, including the LMPD in that group. 126 people attended these sessions, both virtually and held in person at locations throughout the city. Those focus groups included groups like Metro Council, the LMPD sworn officers, LMPD civilian employees, domestic violence and homeless advocates, nonprofits, the international community, business leaders, LMPD command staff, other elected officials, Black Officers for Change, recovery and mental health advocates, activists, and on. And what we heard from these listening sessions and these surveys were common themes. They wanted a leader who would be accountable, who would be humble, yet innovative and collaborative, community-oriented. They wanted somebody who had honesty and integrity and compassion. They told us that the new chief should focus on de-escalation strategies. Some referenced demilitarizing the police or defunding the police, justice for Breonna Taylor, support for Black Lives Matter. From the LMPD, we were told the new chief needed to bridge the gap between the community and the department by establishing trust and legitimacy, both internally and externally, to be highly visible in the community, to be a good communicator, approachable, and a good listener. And we used all this great input to create a position profile. And that was incorporated into a job announcement, which we posted and marketed nationwide throughout the month of August. And while that job was open, PERF actively recruited candidates based on the community input and its own extensive network of police professionals. And in addition to that, we received a lot of personal referrals and publicly encouraged anybody who was interested and qualified to apply. Now, frankly, I had no idea what to expect. We had concerns about attracting high-quality candidates who were willing to take on Louisville's challenges. We had continual protests and demands for police reform. We had staffing shortages and morale issues and a lapsed contract. We had the mayor's term limit to think of. Certainly, we needed not only to attract the best candidates, but we needed to keep them interested throughout the process and just hope they didn't get picked up by other cities. As PERF will tell you, the competition this past year for a new police chief has been fierce. Turnover has been incredibly high, and every city is looking for someone with the same qualities our community said we wanted. So personally, I was incredibly happy that we ended up with 28 candidates. The vast majority had considerable experience in law enforcement at executive levels, including 11 current or former chiefs. And it was a diverse pool. Just under half were Black, about 15% were female, and most were from outside Louisville. The next step was the review and interview process. And based on its experience, PERF recommended a panel size of about 7 people to facilitate discussion, achieve consensus, and minimize the chances of disclosure. Now, non-disclosure at this stage was important, and let me explain why. Candidates identified confidentiality as their top concern. They had a risk to their current employment, especially chiefs in other cities. They had a risk to their reputation or credibility if they were not selected for the job. And some candidates actually told PERF, that they were declining to apply because they didn't want to risk exposure prior to selection. Now, clearly, we wanted to avoid losing candidates, and we also needed to keep high-quality applicants in the running. And for those reasons, supported by laws and policies about privacy interests, the panelists were required to sign non-disclosure agreements. The next tough part was picking the panelists, because how do you select the right representative? Or how do you prioritize one group's interests over another? Everybody's interests are important. Everybody's opinion matters. So we chose elected officials, specifically Metro Council President David James. We also chose the chair and the co-chair of the Public Safety Committee, Jessica Green and James Peden. They are elected to represent the people of this city. We also chose appointed officials from the mayor's office who are responsible for community building, Vincent James, performance improvement, Carmen Moreno Rivera, equity, Kendall Boyd, and public safety, myself. And in discussion among this group, we decided to pick an 8th panel member who would represent the community at large. We looked at residents who had demonstrated an interest in civic engagement and civic responsibility by applying to Louisville's boards and commissions. The group chose Sharon Van Cleve, a JCPS teacher at Rangeland Elementary, and I want to take this moment to publicly commend Ms. Van Cleve. Throughout this process, she devoted her time, balanced against the demands of NTI, and conscientiously scrutinized every application, fully participated in every interview, and voiced her opinion in every deliberation. And in my view, she is a role model for those who want to make a difference in their communities. Ms. Van Cleve, thank you. The panel was announced publicly on October 1st, and the panelists were provided with results of those surveys and listening sessions so they could see what the community and LMPD said they wanted in their next chief. And to further the community's engagement in the process, we solicited interview questions from the public through a PERF email address. The panel met 5 times in addition to 18 interview sessions where we thoroughly reviewed those applications together. We drafted, reviewed, and voted on interview questions in an interview to elicit the candidates' views on things like implicit bias and racial equity, healing and building trust between the community and the police, gun violence, working with the FOP, police reform and accountability, Louisville's response to protests, and other topics. We discussed and deliberated the results of the interviews, and we voted on who would proceed to the next stage. We also deliberated about public exposure during the final stage of the process. The benefits obviously included maximum transparency, an opportunity to solicit more input, and we had heard from some community members who strongly voiced their desire to be involved. But the risks at that stage included that finalists could still choose to remain anonymous due to their current jobs, and they might drop out if forced to be exposed. Risks also included delaying the process, which could result in our best candidates being picked up for jobs in other cities. And also allowing a public vote at this stage could nullify the panel's substantial efforts, which already incorporated a lot of input from the public and LMPD. Again, I can't emphasize enough how much input we had already received and incorporated throughout the process. At one point, even Perf remarked they had never participated in or seen a chief search, which included this much public input. In November, the panel made a recommendation to the mayor, and Chief Shields was unanimously proposed as the #1 choice. Obviously, a lot still had to happen. The mayor conducted several interviews himself, background investigations were conducted, references were contacted, and terms were negotiated, and finally, an offer was made. So I am thrilled to share in the announcement today that Erika Shields accepted the offer to become Louisville's next chief of police. But don't just take it from me. We have panelists here with us today to tell you in their own words about their experience and share their thoughts on the process and the selection. So at this point, I'd like to call each of the panelists up, starting with Council President David James.
Good morning, everybody. I just want to really say that the selection process for Chief Shields to be the next LMPD chief was a very tedious process. Amy Hess did an outstanding job providing us with information and leading us and making sure that we were very meticulous in our thought processes about who would be the next chief. And we had some outstanding people that applied to be the chief of LMPD. But I really have to emphasize that the Amy Hess and the entire panel, we all felt that Chief Shields was the #1 person. And it was unanimous amongst all of us, without any hesitation, without any doubt. She just rose to the top. And I feel very, very confident that she is going to do an outstanding job leading our police department, communicating with our citizens, restoring the legitimacy and the credibility of our department and of government to our citizens. And I just think she's going to do outstanding. Thank you for being here.
Next, we have the chair of the Public Safety Committee, Jessica Green, who I believe is online with us.
Good afternoon, everybody, and I'm so sorry that I cannot be with you all in person. Good morning. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon. Good morning, everybody. I'm so sorry that I cannot be with you all in person. As President James indicated, this was a very long process. The search committee dedicated months on months of time and energy to make sure that we were selecting the best chief out of the pool of candidates that we had. I stand by the decision of the committee, and what I am asking the public to do is please give Chief Shields an opportunity to earn your trust. She is interested in 21st century policing. I know that she will be available to have conversations with community members that have questions or concerns. Please give her the opportunity and afford her the capability to sit down and talk to you all about the vision that she has for the city of Louisville and LMPD as we move forward. It is time for us to heal and to work together. And as a part of that, we're going to have conversations. So welcome to Chief Shields. And again, give her the opportunity to earn your trust.
Next, I'd like to call on the co-chair of the Public Safety Committee, James Beaton.
I can't, if I commended Chief Shields anymore, it would just be echoing everyone else's accolades. Again, unanimous decision. I think that's all you need to know. I know some in the media contacted us somewhere midway of the process when cities like Dallas and Nashville and Milwaukee started making lists public. And I want to say that even I was like, maybe that's a better way. I got to looking at it. I got to looking at their finalists. So for those of you who are maybe not necessarily comfortable with the non-disclosure, I can tell you that our list of 28, not even just the finalist, our entire package of 28 applicants were better than many of the final lists from some of those major cities. I mean, we got the best of the best to come here, and there were, and we're talking sitting chiefs of major cities that were interested in coming here. And because of the non-disclosure, and again, I'm not necessarily comfortable with it. I like the word transparency, but I will tell you that it was the best thing for this city at this time. And I just want the public and I want everyone to know, I've looked at, I've analyzed it. I've tried to, is there a better way? And I'm gonna have to say no. So that was kind of what I wanted to talk about when I got up here with the process. We had a tremendous selection, and Chief Shields was the best of the best. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to call on the Chief of Community Building, Vincent James.
Thank you, Chief Hess, and thank you, Mayor. And I want to thank all of the candidates, 28 candidates that had applied and spent the time in terms of being interested in being invested in the city. I also want to thank all the previous chiefs of Louisville Metro government for the good, the bad, and indifference. They've all paved the way to where we are today. In particular, Chief Yvette Gentry, Interim Chief Yvette Gentry, for the work that she's done, the incredible work in coming in such a short time, in such a short period, and making a lot of changes that was necessary to pave the way for Erika Shields. We are fortunate as a city to have had some of the most competent and capable people to be able to lead our city. But I'm really encouraged by the process that we went through as an interviewing panel. I both interviewed in the public sector and the private sector, and even in nonprofit. And this was the most intense, grueling interviewing process that I participated in. And I'm very confident and very excited for our city, for the new journey that we have. An opportunity to be able to really show the world what it means to be able to build a community of law enforcement with trust, a community of law enforcement that knows and understands the issues of equity, and a community that knows how to be a beloved community, where everyone has an opportunity to have access to the necessary things to make their life better. So I'm encouraged in terms of what we went through and how we've came together to unanimously agree that Erika Shields was the best candidate, and we're grateful today that she starts a new journey in our city. thank you, Chief Hess, again for leading us and giving us the opportunity to serve. Thank you.
Our former Chief of Performance Improvement, Carmen Moreno Rivera, couldn't be with us here this morning. So next up, I'd like to ask Kendall Boyd, our Chief of Equity.
Thank you, Chief F. Good morning, everybody. As Chief Equity Officer for Louisville, Kentucky, of course, what's at the core of my work is this concept of equity. And so when this opportunity arose to participate in this panel, equity was all that was on my mind. Seeing what has transpired in our community over the last few months with the protests for racial justice, seeing the way COVID has impacted our communities, and just seeing what's going on in our world, I knew that the next police chief would have to understand that if you don't have equity at the core of your policing, then you're going to fail. So when we did these interviews, Chief Shields went above and beyond expectation. She gets it. And when I say she gets it, she understood what the concept of equity was. I didn't have to explain it to her. She told me what it was in her mind. And she explained to me how she understood the history of the civil rights movement coming through Atlanta and working in a majority African-American cities. So I'm super excited about Chief Shields being here with the understanding that this is our opportunity, Louisville, to move forward. This is it. This is our clean slate. We're going to build trust between LMPD and our community, and we're going to make Louisville a world-class city. So thank you for this opportunity, Chief Hess. Thank you, Mayor, and welcome.
All right, and batting anchor, I'd like to ask Ms. Van Cleve to come up and say a few words.
Good morning. In an effort to not be repetitive, I would just like to say that my thoughts are in line with the previous panelists who have spoken. I do also want to add that I feel that it's been a great honor to be a part of this process. I feel highly confident that we have chosen the best candidate to lead our great city of Louisville. I see great things coming forward. And I, once again, would like to say thank you for the opportunity.
I know we'll be happy to take questions in a moment, but I just wanted to take one more opportunity to thank our interim chiefs, Yvette Gentry, and before her, Rob Schroeder. The amount of dedication and sacrifice that I have seen and witnessed from them has been phenomenal, and I think the city should be proud of the public servants that they have and the folks who stepped up into that role, and I want to thank them personally at this time. Mayor, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. All right. Thanks again, Chief Hess. The interview panel, again, phenomenal job. Lots of dedication required to get this done. So really appreciate you all stepping up for your city. And in most cases, once again, stepping up for your city. Also want to thank the more than 10,000 Louisvillians who participated in the selection process. I mean, that's an amazing number. As Perf said, they'd never seen anything like that before. Surveys, focus groups, proposing interview questions. It was a all-in type of approach here to make sure we got the next chief here for our city. And please continue to share your priorities with Chief Shields. She is your chief for the city of Louisville starting January the 19th. In the meantime, we have one chief at a time. Current Chief Gentry is our chief up until that very moment, so everybody needs to understand that as well. I want to give my thanks also to Yvette, Chief Gentry, for the wonderful job that she has done. It took a very unusual person, tremendous sacrifice to herself and her family in a time where our city really had great need to step forward, to heed the call to what I think is one of the most noble things that you can do, and that is to serve the public. She didn't need to do it. She had a very comfortable life as she contemplated on this. And when you think about what Chief Gentry has been able to accomplish with her team in the last several months, in the face of lots of significant challenges that we're all very much aware of, it's been just fantastic. She's increased oversight and supervision, resulting in greater accountability. She has had countless meetings with officers and others to understand their challenges and improve their working conditions. She's enacted structural reforms to better tackle violent crimes, and she's worked with those fighting for racial justice to address their needs and concerns as well. So Chief Gentry, at one of our city's lowest points, you stood up, you stepped forward, you helped lead our great city away from darkness and toward the light at great pain to yourself. But on behalf of the entire city of Louisville, we want to say thank you very much to Chief Yvette Gentry. And with that, we're happy to take any questions.
Yeah, I have a question for Ms. Shields.
Please?
Um,
I'm sorry. Can you hold on, please? The reporter's in the room. We will be bringing a microphone around to you. So if you just raise your hand, and Jessica will be bringing that microphone around. To those who are watching on WebEx, I will be trying to work in your questions as we go. If there are media representing a certain media here in the room, and you're also got people on the WebEx asking questions, just be mindful that we're trying to balance so that everybody gets an opportunity to ask your questions. And with that, I'll also ask that you identify with your name and the media you represent. Thank you.
And let's start with our local media.
Okay, there we go. Good morning. This question is for Chief Shields. First of all, welcome to Louisville. I did speak to a number of people in Atlanta who first off spoke very highly of you, both police officers and people in local government there. One of the things that I wanted to ask is the reason behind your resignation. A number of those people told me that the real reason why you decided to resign was because you did not agree with the firing of Officer Rolfe, who was involved in the Brooks shooting. Is that accurate? Can you explain your decision for the resignation? And also, what would you tell officers here who feel the enormous amount of pressure, but also that the administration here has left them behind? And I'm sorry,
yeah.
my name is Natalia with Wave 3.
All right, Natalia. So no, it was not the singular reason that I stepped down. The killing of Rayshard Brooks was a tragedy, and it was awful. And what I recognized is there were multiple issues at play, even before that, but it culminated with Rayshard's killing. And what I realized is as long as I stayed, I was going to be a distraction, and the city needed to move forward. And it would have been self-serving to stay at that point, given everything. And so I made a decision, not an easy one, but I made a decision to step down. And to the officers here, I would say, yes, we are in a very difficult space. I mean, policing, you have to know in law enforcement right now, you are not going to get the benefit of the doubt. Most cops are doing the job flawlessly, but then you see these highlights where we're out of control. And collectively as a profession, we simply have to do this job better. And as leaders, as chiefs, we simply must hold our people accountable, regardless how uncomfortable it is. And so what I would say to this department, what appealed to me, one of the many things was, I saw this department as just having an incredible amount of heart. They got that this wasn't good. They have the heart, they want to do better. There was a lot of things that they were doing correctly, and coupled with the I felt the city was fantastic, and the community, it was engaged, it cared, and that's not a given. It's just not. And so what I'd say to the officers is, you are in a good space. You're not feeling it, but it's my job to help you understand that this job can be enjoyable again. And once you find yourself enjoying the job, you'll be performing at a much higher level. Thank you.
Hi, Denny Camper with WLKY News. My question is also for Chief Shields. The news of your hiring got out a little bit early, and in just the few minutes that we've been sitting here, there's been a lot of folks who are honestly outraged and see you as somebody who resigned because of an incident very similar to an incident we had here that resulted in the firing of our previous chief, Chief Conrad. So what do you say to the community who don't think very highly of you in this moment?
Well, what I would say is first off, I think it does an injustice to Breonna Taylor to say that they're similar incidents. They're not. And what? Okay. Well, but allow me to say that I think it's important to say that every situation is different. And this is where I speak to police. The public is not going to take the time to differentiate. They're just going to see police heavy-handedness. In saying that, though, I would ask that people look at my body of work and see who I have been, what I have accomplished, what I require of a department. And, you know, it's sickened me what happened to Rayshard. I can't go into it to the level of detail I'd like to due to the litigation, but I think one of the main things that we in law enforcement have to shift our focus away from is allowing officers to get in the space to be judged just on that one snippet of the incident. But rather, as law enforcement, we must hold our people accountable from the decision-making from the get-go to the very end. And I would just ask that people step back, take the time to actually see what I accomplished, what I believe in, and how I led the department.
Hi, this question is for Chief Shields. I'm Darcy Costello with the Courier-Journal. I was wondering, assuming you've reviewed some of the public records in the Breonna Taylor investigation, do you agree with the department seeking to fire or firing detectives Brett Hankison, Miles Cosgrove, and Joshua James? And do you have any other impressions about the case that you'd like to share?
Darcy, you've been wearing out my phone for about 2 months, if I'm not mistaken. So allow me to say that I have known Chief Gentry for many years, and I know she is extremely conscientious, extremely intelligent, and very thoughtful. And if she came to the decision she came to, I know it wasn't done haphazardly. It was the correct decision, and I support her on it. And I think that the criticism that she's getting is unfair. And I think, you know, that she stepped into a situation that was going to be hard to walk away from feeling good about, and she held her head high while she did the job, and I'm very appreciative of that. I think the other thing of note is that the FBI is still conducting a civil rights investigation, and that is critical. That will look further and deeper in issues that, if they're there, absolutely need to be ferreted out.
This question is for Chief Shields as well. My name is Sanai. I am a reporter with WHS 11 News. You talked a lot about building trust between community members and police officers. Can you explain what does that look like here in Louisville? What kind of things are you planning to work on when you take the role starting January 19 to start working towards healing something the city has been desperately wanting?
The key for getting that level of trust is, first off, getting not just officers, but command staff out of the buildings, out of the patrol cars, and walking in the communities and knowing people. And there has to be that level of familiarity and comfort with the commanders, because the commanders have to hear what the residents feel if they're going to be aware of the operations of the folks under them. And by that I mean, so often you send people out thinking they're going to do X, and actually Y is occurring. And if you're not out there talking to the people on the receiving end, you'll have no idea. So a large part of it will be assuring that we are actually hearing directly from the folks who are in the areas that feel that they have been, or they simply have been, on the receiving end of disparate treatment. The other thing is, to me, body-worn cameras have provided a window into conduct like we've never had before in law enforcement. And to not fully leverage auditing and reviewing body-worn cameras to see how officers are conducting themselves when no one is present, is imperative to reining in problem behavior. Generally speaking, in my experience, most people do the job professionally, and there's a few that really take us down. And it's, to me, that's a huge component of it. One of the things I'm going to have to balance initially is, unfortunately, due to COVID, there's not the robust activities going on in communities that we can attend, as definitely would be, it's a huge way. Virtually it's what we're working with. But I will also say you just have to get out of your car, and you've got to go talk to folks from a community perspective. Operationally, we have a lot of self-reflection to do, policies that need amending. Hilliard Hines has done a really exhaustive report that has put forth a number of terrific ideas on reform. Because you have to get granular into the conduct of the officers, and it's a problem. It's a problem when you're seeing conduct that is so far out in left field. And what struck me is I didn't see commanders stepping up and saying, this is not who we are. That goes to, there has to be a culture shift in what is an acceptable norm within the department in certain areas.
Hello, I'm John Boyle with WFPL. Chief Shields has already answered this question, but I wanted to get a response to a similar question from Mayor Fisher. After this past year's racial justice movement, I wanted to hear why you think it was a right move for our city to hire a chief who resigned after another prominent shooting of a black person elsewhere in the country.
What we've been looking for all along is the very best person that was available to lead our city, and we relied very heavily on our selection panel. There was an exhaustive process, as you know. When Chief Shields came through that whole process, and this whole issue had been vetted out with her, and still received the unanimous selection from our evaluation panel, that's what then led to the next step. We talked about it extensively in the various interviews that we have. And one of the unfortunate realities is that if you are the chief of a major city in this country, you have dealt with issues like this. So then the question is, how do you deal with an issue like that? And I thought the action that she took to heal the city showed a lot of class on her behalf. Atlanta Police Department has around 2,000 police officers or so. As we all know, both locally and around the country, not every officer gets every interaction right. And there is no perfect person out there. And so to have someone of Chief Shields' accomplishments, and when you talk to the people in the Atlanta Police Department and activists down there, you hear laudatory comments about the chief. So given all of that, we felt very confident moving forward. We are at a moment, obviously, in our city and our country where we've got to continue to come together. And there's not going to be just some simple snap of the finger solution anywhere. So it's going to require all of us to get to know each other more, to understand deeply who we are, and then to move forward. So you put all that together is why the offer was made to the chief, again, by far and away the unanimous selection of our panel. And I think our community is going to be very pleased with the chief here over the coming months and years.
This question is for Chief Shields. Hi, my name's Katrina. I'm with WDRB. Some questions for the programs that we already have here existing in Louisville. We are a city that has a lot of programs, has a lot of committees, recently just put out the Group Violence Initiative. Talk about, do you have a level of commitment to the things that we already have here? And my second question is, you said very specifically you want to tackle gun violence. What are some specifics to that? Because we do have existing programs or initiatives that have attempted to do this already.
So the GVI, the gun violence intervention that you mentioned, is fantastic. And I'm really looking forward to seeing, it's been very successful in some cities, so I'm really looking forward to seeing what their ideas are for Louisville. I'm a big fan of, we called it Pivot in Atlanta, but that was also taking, it's the holistic approach of taking the gun violence victims, the community, and also working with healthcare to make sure that we're meeting with these folks, that they're being met with by community members before they leave the hospital, because there's so many victims of gun violence that won't report it. And trying to insert layers of not police, but people that are professionals in other areas, healthcare workers, what have you, to try to offset some of the disputes that are lending themselves to these shootings. So I'm a huge believer in the alternatives and the holistic approach. But I will also tell you is, can you make an impact on it, on your police operations? Absolutely. If folks are so focused on drugs, typically what you find when you start drilling down is that the arrests are misdemeanor, it's drug users, there's not a nexus between violent crime. And if you focus on getting the guns off the street, typically what you'll get is when I triage the guns, the violence, and the drugs. They typically go together. If you're going after the guns and you're getting the person who is using, engaging, possessing illegal firearms, and you're committing violence, you typically will also be getting the folks who are distributing drugs as well. But you have to use the intelligence that is available for you to put people in the correct areas, but your focus needs to be illegal drugs and the quality of the arrest. And the focus should be on felony arrest. You further get success when you have the district attorney and the U.S. attorney who will help you prosecute these cases. And that's a key component of it. You can make the best arrests in the world, but if it doesn't go anywhere, they're right back. So it's all about partnerships, but there is no one-stop solution, and I'm very receptive to whatever programs are already in place and what can we adopt.
Hi, my name is Summer Dickerson with 502 Live Streamers, and my question is actually for the new chief. As a community member and a community activist, I would like to know what you are going to say to the community, considering what you are just leaving out of, that you just resigned from Atlanta. What reassurance that you can give us as a community that if something does happen here, that accountability and transparency will happen?
I think that my record in Atlanta speaks for itself. I absolutely took a firm stand on issues of excessive force. My approach to excessive force deviated from what is the norm, and by that I mean, to me, it's imperative for accountability. You look at the totality of the officer's decision-making. Could something have been done differently before the force was used so we could have prevented this outcome? And I have no problem holding an officer accountable who engaged in poor decision-making on the front end, which resulted in someone being, just let's say, hurt or killed on the back end. I think for the community, it's imperative that they know I want to listen. I intend to hear them. It's to me, what's important for me is that the community meet with me to the expense, to as much as possible. I happily give out my phone number to anyone. I'm available at all times of day. And for me, the community that's the most valuable part of my job. I've got to insert myself in the community to get their level of trust. I realize that. But I also will tell you, I think my track record shows that I'm very responsive to what the community's demands, needs, or deficiencies are.
Becky is there we go. We're going to take one more question from the room, and then I will read the questions that are on the chat, assuming that we get or audio back on. I understand we've lost audio on the chat, so once I get the okay that's back on, we'll go through the ones on the chat. If we don't get audio back on, then we will take these questions and respond by email to the reporters. So Jessica, go ahead.
Yes, this is Clay Calloway with the Louisville Defender and the Saturday Morning Solutions Show. Quick question to the Director of Public Health and Safety, if I may ask a question. First of all, I would like to commend you and the committee on the process. I think that the process had great integrity in it, and I commend you for that, and also the members of that committee, particularly the 6 members that were black, and the unanimous vote goes a long way to undergirding the integrity of the process. So I commend you for that. My one question is this, is that naturally with the current chief being an African-American female, a natural question was how many African-American candidates applied and how many made the final 3 cut in the decision of the committee?
Yes, sir, and thank you for the question. As I stated previously, we had 28 candidates apply. Just under half of those were black. We did have black candidates through the final stages of the process. I personally am very proud of the panel that everyone who was a participant in this panel actually not only listened to what the community had told us through the surveys and the listening sessions, particularly with the community, the black community, the faith leaders, the activists, and others, but also incorporated it into the questions that were asked of the candidates. And I think in looking at that process, I can't think of a more conscientious group of people who really looked at every individual candidate as an individual and saw how they might best meet what the community was looking for. Thank you.
We still don't have audio, but we're going to go ahead and ask the questions that are on the chat, and we will make the audio available, the Metro TV taping, to anyone who wasn't able to hear. And I'm not going to ask the questions that have already been asked and answered in the room. From Amina Elahi from WFPL, she asked Chief Shields, you said it was disrespectful to Breonna Taylor to say it's a similar case to Rayshard Brooks. Could you elaborate on what you mean by that?
I think that Breonna Taylor was at home in her apartment in bed, and the police came into her apartment, and she ends up dead. And it's like, that didn't have to happen. And imagine, and this is where it's race reckoning. This doesn't happen to white people. It just doesn't. And it was heartbreaking. And I'm a cop, okay? And I get how difficult the job is. But what I would say to police is, if we really are doing this fairly and impartially, why is this not happening in white communities? And don't tell me that it's because the black people where the crime is, the black people where the violence is. That's crap. And if you're going to police fairly and equitably, your practices have to be consistent and your standards have to be consistent regardless of the neighborhood. And LMPD is by no means alone in this. It's just the police culture. It's very easy to get, and I understand why there's a tremendous amount of focus on my race. I get it. But what I will tell you, what rises above race within the police culture is the police culture. And having come up in a city and a department where the majority was black, I can tell you it's not white police behaviors, it's not black police behaviors, it's police behaviors that have to change. And that's what this is about. And it's uncomfortable. It's not what people want to hear internally, but if we are going to get out of this space as a nation, we've got to be candid about how we're doing things. That's what I mean when I say it was different. It's just this, she was asleep in her bed.
For you, Chief Shields. Next question is also from you. I'm sorry, my mic is going in and out. During your time in Atlanta, this is from Marcus Green of WDRB, who asks, during your time in Atlanta, an audit found that officers were routinely not turning on their body cameras. What specifically will you do in Louisville to ensure that similar failings, some of which have already occurred in LMPD, don't happen here?
So let me tell you, I requested that audit. And here's why, because I've been a cop. And when I came on, they just rolled out bulletproof vests. So I was a recruit, so I wore mine because I did what every recruit did. I did what I was told. And I got to the zone, and all the senior cops were like, take that off. Yeah, it's just bulky. They weren't wearing it. Why? Because they were being told what to do. It was changed, and they didn't like it. Think about it. It's a bulletproof vest to save our lives, and we still wouldn't do it. So when body-worn cameras came and we had them, and I'm being told that we're doing a great job, no. I knew that I was being fed what people wanted me to believe, but there was no way it was accurate. So I went to the city auditors and I said, audit us. Because I would rather identify these deficiencies before there is a crisis. It's almost impossible to get your feet under you during a crisis. You have to deal with these lapses in a time of steadiness. And the audit did show. It showed the supervisors were not auditing. Or they would go and audit the high-flying candidates, but purposely avoid the ones they knew they didn't have it on. As a result of that audit, I actually took several officers and a supervisor, and I created the body-worn camera audit unit. And all they did was audit the supervisors to make sure they were doing their job. And the other thing they did is they handled all discipline. Because what happens is, you'll discipline a person one way, you another way. No. You got a grace period of a couple months to get your stuff together, kids, and then it's suspension days and you're losing money. And I had to get the attention of people. It's imperative that they understand the significance of the camera being on. I'm not looking to hem someone up who does something stupid, who says something stupid. Yes, they'll be held accountable. But imagine if y'all wore a camera for 24 hours a day. I'm pretty sure we'd see some things we'd rather not, or hear some things that are just like, come on. You're not trying to get a bead on the person and fire them, but you are trying to say, what you're really trying to do is you're trying to ensure that there is that level of accountability. And if you're doing the job properly, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. And I think people, they feel like, well, they're going to want to fire me because I cussed. No. We'll deal with that, but that doesn't rise to the level of if you don't have probable cause for a traffic stop, or if your traffic stops are all disproportionately against a race or gender, or if you're using excessive force. So it's imperative that we leverage the cameras because the technology is there. It's there.
Okay, two very quick questions. The first one, is for Chief Hess, asking when the Hillard Hines report will be released to the public. And the second one asking Mayor Fisher or members of the interview panel to ask, upon first hearing of Chief Shields' application, did you have any reservation about interviewing her, and how was she able to win your confidence?
Okay, the first part on the Hillard Heinz review. Yeah, so we contracted with Hillard Heinz to conduct a top-to-bottom review of the police department's policies, procedures, practices, and they have done a tremendous amount of work since we signed that contract. Again, heavily emphasizing the community input on that and the police department's input on that. And I'm very happy to say that we are in the final stage of that process. As a matter of fact, as recent as yesterday, we had one of the final meetings we will have with Hillard Heinz in reviewing the draft report and identifying any factual inaccuracies. And let me just clarify that. This is a factual accuracy review we are doing right now. It's not intended to say we don't like your conclusions, we don't like your recommendations. It's just if they may have misunderstood or misinterpreted or misstated facts. And that's the stage we're at now. Once that happens, I anticipate that the final report will be produced and published within the next couple of weeks. Do you want me to answer the second one, or? Yeah, panelists, anybody?
In case you're wondering who's been wiping the desk, that's Margaret. She's doing an outstanding job. Thank you. The question, I believe, was what did I think when I saw that Chief Shields was one of the applicants? Having been a law officer before for 30 years, I was familiar with Chief Shields. So when I saw her name in the packet of people that had applied, I was very pleased. I thought, well, let's see what she's got. But she was in the pool just like everybody else, and she just rose to the top above everybody else. And so I'm very pleased that she's here. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. My reaction was one of curiosity and excitement. The Major Cities Chiefs Association is a fellow organization with the United States Conference of Mayors, so we do a lot of work together. Chief Shields' reputation with the Major Cities Chiefs was more of their most progressive, reform-minded, loving policing as a profession person. And so it was curious to me why the mayor of Atlanta, or why the police chief of Atlanta would be interested in this job. And when we spoke, the passion that she had for coming to a city where the Breonna Taylor tragedy took place and putting her past experience to work to try to create a police department that would define what the best of 21st century policing looks like in today's tumultuous times won me over. Nobody else talked that way, from the heart, from the head, from the conviction, to try at this very critical time in policing in America to say we need to do better, and to build a team of police officers that also says we need to do better, which is what the vast, vast majority of LMPD wants as well. And someone with a reputation to be able to go into the community and to listen authentically and translate those concerns with the concerns of LMPD into a team to co-produce public safety. Nobody else was even close to that. So you've got to look at the full body of work. And when our evaluation team came back with their recommendations, these are people that have a lot of different life experiences. I thought that was just very, very strong. And so that's what leads us to where we're at today, folks, not here just in Louisville, but in the country as well. And I think some of the high praise and high questions that we're hearing today represent where we're at in Louisville and represent where we're at in America. And our job as Louisvillians to say, we know that. We're a great city that has great determination. Louisville has not backed away from these challenges that we've had over this past year, whether it be the pandemic, our racial justice protests, the tragedies that we've had. Some cities have shut down. Other cities, police, community don't talk to each other. It's a standoff. We've leaned into those issues uncomfortably here in our city. And we know we have to do that so we can be one of the great cities in the country that shows folks what the future looks like with police-community relations. That's what I'm dedicated to. That's what my team is dedicated to. Chief Hess, I want to thank you again for leading our effort here, selection process. Chief Shields, thank you for your interest in this position and your commitment to making us that great city that others will look to. To our evaluation team, thank you all once again. To the media, thank you for continuing to cover all this. And Chief Gentry, thank you once again for your sacrifice and commitment. God bless you all. Talk to you next time. Yeah, I can just confirm that Chief sent letters to their legal counsel last night upholding the decisions that she had made. As you all know, KRS 67C prevents further comment on that, but those letters were sent last night. Yeah, okay. And then that you have the normal appeal process, the merit board, and all that's taking place. Right. Thanks, everybody.